Good morning, and welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. Whether you're joining us live here during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group or catching this on your favorite podcast platform on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and my guest this week is Dr. Karen Curry Parker, a 4/6 Sacral Manifesting Generator, aka Time Bender. She's a right angle cross of contagion, aka cross of passion and quantum human design. She's the creator and founder of the Quantum Human Design System and written so many books and done so many things. And my personal human design, I guess hero is probably the word I think of. And I am so excited that she is here with us to share her human design story. And I have had the pleasure of meeting Karen in person several times. I've done training with her for a while. So this is very exciting for me. And thanks so much, Karen. I'd love if you just dive right in and tell everyone this great story of yours.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'll dive right in, I guess.
I know you have a lot of story to tell.
Well,
so I just want you to.
I've been doing this for so long. I keep doing the math. Like this morning, I was like, oh my God, it's been almost 26 years. Like, how did that happen? But I think the story starts before the story starts because
it usually does.
I am a 4/6, and I think that six line directive of that quest for purpose and meaning, which is just, you can't shrug it off. It's not possible to shrug it off. And then on top of that, in my own chart, I also have the 1/8, which to me is also just it's a driving energy that just pushes and pushes for authenticity and creativity and contribution. And, I would say that my story probably starts when I'm 4, which was even before human design was even here. And it's a thing that is actually an impediment for me as a teacher. And that impediment is that I never could have like a regular job. I've only had a job for 6 months of my life. I'm not employable. I'm feral. I don't have that, I escaped from the corporate world story. I have a story that really started with an imaginary friend when I was 4. I had an imaginary friend named Thomas, which, over the years, I finally realized, oh, this is my spirit guide. But Thomas told me while I was riding in the back of my mom's car and she was smoking and, that's how old I was. Those are the days. Thomas told me, your job in this lifetime on this planet is to go forth and teach only love. And that has been my message internally, my driver from the very start. And I started off as a journalist in school because I wanted to be a writer. And my dad told me I couldn't write a novel because nobody can write novels. So I was like, well, I'll go be a journalist because it's practical. But even as I was a journalist and trying to be really, contributory with my journalism, I was also really wanting to help people. So I ended up really majoring in both journalism and nursing. When I graduated, which as a true to 4/6 form, I graduated when I was 20 with 2 degrees and manifesting generator, open root. I instantly started to look for, okay, how do I teach love? How do I be love? How do I share love? And I ended up working in the labor and delivery unit for 6 months, short job. And that was really beautiful, but I couldn't take orders from anybody. And so I ended up starting my practice as a midwife. And then I had my own children and immediately knew that midwifery wasn't going to work because I was already really tired and I could not get up in the middle of the night and deliver babies. And so I studied life coaching. And then I studied, our youngest son had a really serious speech issue. He has the 1222, right? He's an emotional manifesting generator. And now sort of understanding that 1222, I think it was just that 1222, but he would not speak.
For the people who are really new, what is the 1222?
So this is a channel that connects the emotional solar plexus to the throat center. And it's a channel that's all about articulation. And it's the ability to articulate when you're in the mood or when the timing is right. But when the timing is not right, there's no words. Oftentimes there are no words to express or explain who you are, what you need, et cetera. So, I really, in hindsight, because I didn't know human design at that point, in hindsight, I just think, he just wasn't in the mood to talk for several years. And but we at that time, we learned, my husband at the time, we learned EFT, the emotional freedom techniques. I integrated that with my coaching clients. And that's an energy psychology technique. That's the tapping. You may have heard of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right in your quantum alignment system.
Yeah. And I think, in the olden days, we'd say the tapping and people are like, what is that? Right. Now I say the tapping, like, oh yeah, the tapping. But that worked phenomenally well. Within 2 weeks of tapping, this kid said his first first words were, "I'd like some pie, please," which totally to me is like, he just didn't want to say anything.
Right.
But that left me with a big, huge curiosity of, okay, how do I integrate coaching and energy psychology and how do I really get people unstuck? At that same time, as I was sort of really thinking about what do I do and how do we do this and what's the most effective way to really get people unstuck, my husband at the time, who was in No Motors Projector, and we have 4 kids, all generators, manifesting generator. I'm a manifesting generator. He started to tank. He was burning out big time. He couldn't sit still at the dinner table because his sacral was overrun. He wasn't sleeping. He was exhausted. He was depleted. He was really just struggling. So I said, why don't you go to Sedona? We were living in suburban Houston at the time. I said, why don't you go to Sedona and just do a little spiritual retreat and try to figure out what's up? And he went to Sedona and he came back with a human design chart. And I looked at that chart. He handed it to me. I looked at that chart and I don't even know how to explain what happened to me. I don't even think it was beyond sacral, if that's possible. Like literally when I saw the chart, it felt like this temple bell went off inside of my being. It was just, everything stopped. Like the birds stopped singing, the world stopped. I just was like, oh, I have to learn everything I can learn about this. And I just started to sob. I have a lot of clients and students that have that same experience. I don't think that experience is unique to me necessarily, because when I used to teach expos or do expos, people would come across the sign and with the body graph on it, and they'd just stand there and cry. I learned to just keep tissues at the box. Tissues on the booth, because people would be moved just by the chart itself. So I told my husband, we have to go to Sedona. I have to go learn everything I can about it. And I think he was at such a crisis point at that point that he was like, he was a school teacher at the time. He said there was no way he was going to be able to go back to school. He was so exhausted. So I think he kind of went along with my idea. And so we got the house cleaned up. We put it on the market. We sold it 2 weeks later. We packed everything up. Oh, it was crazy. It was so synchronous. We packed everything up. We drove with the kids and a U-Haul to Sedona. And we got there. And as soon as we got there, my youngest son had an ear infection. And so I took him to the pediatrician's office and came out of the pediatrician's office with this little kid on my hip. I think he was 4 at the time. And as I came out of the pediatrician's office, across the hallway was an office, and on the door of the office was the human design body graph. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go in here. So I opened the door, and there was this huge desk and this little teeny tiny woman behind the desk. That was Marianne Winiger.
Yeah, I know Marianne. Yeah.
And she said to me, did you come for the job? And I said, yep. And she hired me right there on the spot. And so I got to work for Marianne at Human Design America. It was an incredible experience. I got to study and learn. I got to listen to all of the recordings of all of Ra's lectures, and then actually got to learn personally from Ra when he came to the United States on a tour, and really got to be with Ra and listen to Ra and learn from Ra, and just was really amazing. It was amazing. One of the things that for me was also amazing about that experience is that as I started to study, I was really surprised to really learn. I don't tell this to people very often because it's kind of a weird thing. Um, I already knew the system. Like, I didn't have to memorize the gates. I didn't have to memorize anything in the system. At that time, we had the living design program, and then you took rave cartography. And when I took rave cartography, I knew it all. And I was really freaked out by that, frankly. I first of all, I didn't want to tell anybody. Um, I don't know, probably because I have a long history of people stealing off my papers in school. So I was like, I don't want anybody to know. And it made me curious about, well, why do I have this knowingness about it? And if you go back to the original materials that Ra wrote, he talks about how in 1987, during supernova 1987A, when he received the information, he said everybody on the planet got it. He was just the person that got it consciously. And I go back to that a lot because I think it's in all of us, which is why I think so many of us, when we see the chart, we recognize it. We don't know why we recognize it, but it's in us already. And I definitely felt like it has been a living entity inside of me since the first second that I saw the chart. It's almost like, again, it's going to sound weird, but it's almost like I got seated with that system the minute I saw the chart. And it talks to me. It still talks to me. In those days, it really talked to me. Like, I would dream about human design, and I would wake up, with all these ideas and insights about the chart and how different pieces would go together. And I started to do readings. And when I did readings, like, I would get information just from looking at a chart that wasn't even in the charts. I mean, I did, I would know, like, oh, this person's having problems in their marriage, or this person's struggling with, the chart spoke to me. And I think it speaks to, again, all of my students. It's the thing I would always remind my students to trust yourself and what comes through with the chart. But it just started this really amazing relationship with the system itself. And also at that time, human design was going through a lot of shifts and changes. Human design, I don't know how it is because I'm very, very distant from traditional human design at this point, but certainly at that time, I think there was a lot of financial struggles in trying to keep the organization going, trying to get the teachings out there. And I think, there's a lot of intentionality around taking human design to a different place. And Marianne Winiger went away to Ibiza for an annual sort of licensees/owners meeting and came back. And I knew when she came back, I was like, something's up. And she wasn't saying anything. She wasn't talking about the meeting. She wasn't saying anything. But I knew she was really not liking what had happened at the meeting. And so she finally, a couple of weeks later, said, well, human design has organized itself into a Jovian archive, and they're going to be teaching things a little bit differently. And she said, my sacral didn't respond to it, so I'm not going to be doing human design anymore this way. Human Design America is going away. And to me, that was a really perfect sort of beginning of an ending and the ending of a beginning, because I had also really at that point been struggling a lot with traditional human design. And I want to say, before I share this part of the story, I have to bring us back to the seed of human design. And especially if you go back and you look at some of the earlier original materials from Ra, and you read, the Black Book, or the Book of Letters, you hear in the original transmissions. And for those of you who don't know, Ra never wrote. He was not a writer. He was a channel. And so everything that's out there that's written is actually a transcript of channeling, even the books and transcripts of lectures. And if you ever wonder, like, why is this so confusing? Those lectures were spoken in English, translated into German, because at that time, Ra's major supporters were German, and then eventually translated back into English. And I think that's why sometimes it's like, what? Because it's just something got lost in the translation. But when you go back and you read those original materials, particularly the introductions of both of those, those bodies of information. First of all, I think woven in there is just this incredible, moving love for humanity, which I do think kind of got lost a little bit along the way. And secondly, the prime directive, if you will, that is stated over and over and over again is that human design is your experiment. It's your individual journey, your individual course, and that nothing in the chart is prescriptive in the sense that, or rather it is prescriptive, it's not definitive, right? Nothing in the chart is like, you are a this. It is about you exploring your own way of choosing in life, your own way of making decisions. And there's no right or wrong. In fact, I've literally heard Ra say that, word for word, there's no right or wrong. There's just your way, right? And so this story gets more complicated. So
the best ones do.
Right at the end of my journey with human design, my marriage fell apart. And so I was living in Sedona, working for Human Design America. My marriage fell apart. My husband at the time, my poor little no motors projector husband, we're really good friends now, by the way. But at that, he was just like, can't, done. And he left me with like $400 and 4 kids by myself, right, in Sedona. And if you've ever lived in Sedona or been there, it's not a place to live. I mean, my rent at that time for a house was $2,200. And this was, like I said, 20.
Wow.
So I had $400. I had rent due in 2 days. I had 4 kids. I was struggling, right? So I got a job. I responded to, literally, somebody said to me, you should go to the Sedona Center for the New Age and apply for a job. So I went to the Sedona Center for the New Age and I applied for a job and I got a job working as a psychic, which terrified the bejeebus out of me. I mean, really, I was a nurse by training. I was like really anxious about not hurting people by giving information that was going to be misleading or wrong. And to make things even more interesting, Source decided that my fractal, if you will, in working with people at the Sedona Center for the New Age, where only the best psychics work, my fractal was parents who had lost children.
Mm-hmm.
And they were coming to me for mediumship readings. And I'm like, holy moly, I can read tarot cards. I don't know how to do mediumship. And these people were like, as you can imagine, you're a mom that's like, like the worst of the worst of the worst nightmare, right, of losing your children. And they were coming to me for readings. And the first thing that happened is they started sharing with me. I hate telling this part of the story because it still upsets me. They were sharing with me, how many readings they'd gone and how much misinformation and hurtful information they'd gotten from people who were just like not listening to their story and not really, they're basically being, used for money. And of course, as I said, my background is in nursing. And so one of the things I did know how to do is to listen, which is really all most of them wanted. They just wanted to talk about their pain and their kid. So I could listen. I could do that. I could support them in exploring next steps with grief. I was trained to do that. But in the most interesting way possible, I started to learn how to become a medium. And it's just a weird story. I told you I had an imaginary friend named Thomas. Thomas started showing up in my office at the Sedona Center for the New Age. And Thomas started showing up hand in hand with people's passed over children and started giving me information from the children to give to the parents. It totally freaked me out. I mean, I really was like, I can't believe this is what I do for a living. This is so not in my job description. But I had an experience with a woman whose 5-year-old son had passed. And I was doing a reading and Thomas walks in with this little boy And this little boy starts telling me, thank my mom for the blue poinsettias. And I'm like, poinsettias are blue. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? I'm just going to totally screw this woman over, right? She's hurting and I'm going to tell her about blue poinsettias. But I had learned sort of through experience that I just had to go with what came through, right? And so I said, I know this is going to sound weird, Mama, but I am getting a message about thank you for the blue poinsettias. And she just started bawling. And I thought, oh crap, she's going to go ask for her money back. And she said, oh my God, my son's favorite color was blue. And every year at Christmas, I get white poinsettias and I spray paint them blue and leave them on his grave. And I was like, okay.
Oh, wow.
This is so, I have a lot of logical definition, right? And it just like, I had nowhere to file this data. I was, this is something I don't understand. And so at that time, I was working with Ra, and Ra was actually in town teaching. So I went to Ra and I said, Ra, I need to know where this is in my chart. How am I doing this? Because I need to know, like, I need the proof. And he said, oh, it's not in your chart. You're just screwing people over, which is it's typical Ra. If you knew Ra, that's a Ra response, right? And he said, and you're probably crazy. I was like, oh, wow. I was like, you couldn't have said anything worse to me than that. So I'm like, go back to the office and I'm like, okay, I'm crazy and I'm basically screwing over bereaved parents. Oh, yay. My 5027 is in tremendous pain now. And that's the channel that connects the spleen to the sacral, which is a deeply responsible, guilt-riddled channel in the shadow that wants to take care of everyone. So I'm sort of sitting there and I finally, Marianne comes in and I'm like, Marianne, I just had this experience. And she says, well, you should talk to Dr. Eleanor Haspel Portner, who is a woman in California, like one of
She's going to be on the podcast.
I love her. Oh, I love her. She is like literally the most intelligent, brilliant person you will ever meet. I always think, on her planet, maybe she's average, but on our planet, I mean, she's so brilliant. And so it was so weird because literally that afternoon she called the office and I answered the phone and she said, Dr. Eleanor Haspel Portner. I was like, okay, I got to ask you a question. And I said, I just had this experience and I kind of dumped it all on her. And she goes, oh, well, send me your chart. So I sent her my chart and she's like, oh, well, of course you're psychic. You have like almost all of the angelic matrix in your chart. And I was like, oh, okay, I can be at peace with that. I can trust that. And later on in a different conversation with Ra, as I was continuing to explore, and it was hard to ask Ra questions. So you really had to kind of wait because he did not like to be asked questions at all. I had to kind of wait for right timing and all the pieces. And, when I said, I'm really interested in studying with Eleanor, she's doing all this other stuff and she's come up with the angelic matrix. And he said to me, well, you're going to have to choose if you do that. You can either work here or you can go study other things. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Because my sacral is definitely like, bye, see you later, Ra. And of course, right around this, a little bit later after this, Marianne came back. Now I'm leaving it back to when Marianne came back from Ibiza and I'd have these experiences. And I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm done. I really appreciate everything that I've gotten. And it wasn't really, I'm done, like, screw human design. It was like, it's my turn to go look at a different part of this experiment.
Right.
And it never was a repudiation or a middle finger or whatever to traditional human design at all. It was just like, this isn't fitting for me.
So what year were we at this point? Like how far into it all?
2004-ish. I may be wrong because I'm really bad at time.
I know it's hard to keep track. I'm just trying to think because, I talked to Chetan Parkin in April. And he was talking about when he made the decision to leave. So was he already gone when you?
Oh, he and Zen long been gone. That was they were quite a bit before my time, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, Eleanor is really fascinating. She's I've been she does these webinars that I've been doing with her and learning about her 4 worlds. It's an interesting concept. But anyway, back to your story. So now you've made this decision. Your sacral has said no to, was it Jovian then or IHDS or what was it?
It was all of it. It was
all of it. Okay.
It was Jovian, IHDS. I don't know if IHDS was formed around the same time as Jovian, but I think they kind of were hand in hand. And Human Design America went away, and Marianne Winiger basically was like, I'm done. And I think she continued. I don't know what she ended up doing. I think she stayed.
And was Richard Rudd in the picture at this point?
At that time,
Gene Keys?
Yeah, Richard was, I think, still involved in Human Design UK. He was just starting Gene Keys at that time, and really looking at the relationship between the hexagrams and the codons. So that was still pretty rudimentary at that point. Yeah, that probably is good dating, I guess.
Yeah, just trying to put it all together. I haven't approached him yet. He's my next.
Oh, you love him. He is the dearest human, and also you'll just want him to talk forever because his accent is amazing.
Yeah, I love listening to his. I get his email, and every transit he sends out this contemplation of him contemplating one of the gene keys that's whatever the sun is in right now. And even if I've heard him a million times before, it's very calming to listen to him. So
Sir Richard.
Exactly. Okay. So now you made the decision to leave and you went and studied with Eleanor, or what did you do then?
I did study with Eleanor briefly, but it just wasn't feasible really at that point in time. This was, think this was like pre-Zoom, and like if we were doing anything, we were pre-Zoom and maybe teleclass, but even teleclass was kind of like new, right? And I had 4 kids by myself that I was raising, so I really couldn't go jettison to California and go study. And I had to make money because I had people.
Were you doing that as a psychic still, or what were you? How were you?
I was doing that as a psychic, but at that point, I started to integrate human design with all of the other things that I had studied. So I did human design and EFT. So we did. I taught a program called Deconditioning by Design. That was, I think, 2004, 2005. I started teaching a family coach certification training program because a lot of my training is in child development. So I integrated child development and human design and trained people how to use the chart as a coaching tool for family coaches. I did a lot of readings. And at that time, around that time, I also was like, I gotta get out of Sedona. It's not a good place to raise kids. There weren't any, at that time especially, there weren't any resources. It was very expensive. I literally had to drive 45 minutes to go make a photocopy. And so, I mean, it was nuts. It was a great place to retire, but not a really great place to raise a family. So I got invited. This is weird. You respond to things, right? Somebody invited me to come do a holistic expo in Minneapolis. And so I went to Minneapolis and set up my booth and did human design readings at this holistic expo. And a couple of things happened at that expo. One, I met this woman named Mary Rainier, who was like, oh, you have to come to Minnesota and teach a family coach training. I'll help you register people and get people in there. So I was like, okay, I can do that. And number 2, I met a man, which ended up being a pretty terrible adventure. But I met a man, and of course, being newly divorced, I met a man and moved across the country to live in Minnesota with a man who I moved in with and very promptly moved out of his house, kind of like in that short order, like move in, move out. And started, continued my human design business, doing readings, teaching family coaching, teaching EFT and deconditioning by design, and eventually starting professional trainings. I think I started professional training, human design training in 2005 as well. And that was fun. I mean, I used to teach the entire system in a week. I taught it one time in a week in a small room in Sedona, and I think I had like 8 people in there, and most of them were projectors. Because in the beginning of my career, like the first 10 years of my career, all my students and all my people, all my clients were projectors. I just had this massive projector fractal. And I just watched the projectors drop like flies while I was teaching them for just like they were in the back burping and like yawning and crying. And I was like, okay,
too much.
Maybe a week is too much. So I started just break it down. But it was tricky because, like I said, that was like we started to have teleclasses, right? But no visuals. So you couldn't like have slides. There was no Zoom. So I was trying to teach all this stuff virtually. And oh my God, it was such a pain in the butt because you teach and you couldn't record online. And so you'd like teach and be on a corded phone channel that would be like plugged into a cassette player. And then you'd make a master cassette and then you'd mail the master cassette to the cassette people who would duplicate the cassettes, who would mail it. It was a pain in the butt. It's so easy now. And that's when at that point I thought, I need a book because it's so hard to teach this without visuals. And I can't get the visuals in class and I can't teach live because I have kids. And so I decided I'm going to write a book. And so I started writing a book, and then you all don't need to know this part of my story, but then I got pregnant because I don't know why. I know why. My mom asked me that when I called her. I was 43 at the time. I told my mom I'm pregnant. By the way, if you are single and you have 4 children and you're a full-time single parent and you have to call your mom and tell her you got knocked up, oh my God, that was like straight. She was like, don't you know how that happens by now? I'm like, yeah, Mom, I do. But, I had a tubal ligation 10 years prior. It was the furthest thing from my mind. And then I would it at 43, but I did. So I wrote the Understanding Human Design book while I was pregnant. Also wrote the Inside the Body of God book while I was pregnant. And then decided I was going to move as soon as she was born. Man, there's a good pause in the story. So my baby was born. And I have to say, I have had the privilege of raising a projector. Now, I hesitate to say this because I don't want it to sound like, well, I love this kid more than I love my other kids. I love all my kids like violently. But this is my first chance to raise a child by design from the start, to know her design from this literally like the first 10 minutes she was born. And to have, like I said, the privilege of raising a projector. To raise a projector, first of all, you're raising someone who's infinitely smarter than you. That's already really hard. Like when we moved back to Houston 2 weeks after she was born. When we moved and she was in childcare, my mom would go pick her up. She was in childcare a lot because she had horrible separation anxiety and I felt guilty. But she cried the first full year she was in childcare. She only went 2 afternoons for 3 hours a week. But my mom would pick her up and my mom would come home and say, she'd sit down after she'd drop her off and she'd just be stunned. And she'd be sitting at the dining room table like this. And I'd say, Mom, what's wrong? She goes, I think I just picked up a 3-year-old, but I feel like I just had a conversation with a 50-year-old. And I don't, like, it was unbelievable. It's still unbelievable. She's 15 now. To just watch the brilliance and the wisdom of a projector that's not conditioned. I mean, obviously she's conditioned, but to watch that wisdom and that intelligence and that insight and that compassion and that empathy and that ability to really see what's possible come through a projector in this really pure way. Wow, I got so lost in my story. Where am I, Kathy? I'm baby.
You were pregnant. You were pregnant at the pregnant part of your story, and you wrote 2 books. And you were just reflecting on the miracle that came from that thing that was shocking and hard to tell your mom. And I think that's a good thing to remember in our scope of looking at our life story. Is a lot of times the things that we in the moment think are like, "What the heck was I doing? How did this happen?" Happened for a very valid purpose in your journey, right?
Right, exactly.
You needed the experience of raising a child and I hate to use the word correctly, but intentionally by design, okay,
Yes.
you that experience in itself was something you were meant to bring forward. And there was this great projector also that needed to come through you. So, okay. But now back to being pregnant and writing books.
Yeah. So I wrote the book, gave birth, moved across the country from Minnesota back to Texas where my parents lived. Because at that point I was like, I'm going to need some help.
Right.
As I plugged in the computer at the new house, the book was gone. I couldn't find it. It was totally wiped off the computer. I don't know what happened to the book. And so
oh no.
I was, in a brand new house, not even unpacked. The manuscript was due to the publisher, 4 teenagers, 1 newborn baby. And I just put the baby in the laundry basket, kept her at my feet, and reconstructed the whole book in less than 2 weeks. I have to say that was the most stressful 2 weeks of my life. I literally thought, I actually ended up having postpartum depression after that. And I really think part of it was just the stress of those 2 weeks. I did not get to lay in bed and relax and heal or any of those things. Plus I was single. And I just was like, it just pushed me over the edge. It took me a while to recover from that, but I got it out and I got it done and eventually recovered. And that was the Understanding Human Design book. And that book,
the red book.
Yeah, the red book. It changed everything. It gave me, I could send people something so that when we were learning, they had a book. And gradually technology got better. I started to be able to send the trainings with the book on an MP4 player or an MP3 player, which had its own technological challenges. And then, eventually instant teleseminar made it to where you could show slides and, I could do slides and people could have the book, we could follow along. And, at that point, professional training got easier to do. And, slowly, human design also kind of gained traction. I mean, I think when I published or when Understanding Human Design was published, I think Chetan had just published his book. I don't think that Ra and Linda Bonnell's book was out yet. It was close, but not yet. And, the conversations that people didn't know human design. I mean, it was just really no man's land, really. And as I said, and sort of that's phase 1 in my human design story. So phase 1 is I survived. Do we need to take a commercial break yet here, Kathy?
No, I just glanced and I saw in the comments here, Jamie says, I remember when we first got to see Karen's beautiful slides.
Yes, that was a long time ago. They were terrible. I'm not visually gifted that way. I think she's being facetious.
I know that you always comment in your presentations when there's a slide in there that you did and you're like, and here's, because you'll put a stick figure or something to represent, but they're very charming and quaint, right?
Yes,
sometimes simplicity is good. So.
Right. I can be charming and quaint. So that was phase 1. Now, phase 2. So in my personal life, I'm holding things together with duct tape and fighting the repo man and trying to stay alive and feed children. In my professional life, I'm coaching and I'm integrating EFT and energy psychology, other energy psychology techniques, and implementing my own background in coaching. And I'm starting to get a lot of people who are saying, I really like this human design thing, but I don't like it. I don't relate to it. It's really negative. It's really heavy. It's not really helping me figure out what's next in my life. And I've also was deeply exploring the question, why are people stuck? Conditioning made sense, but conditioning was not explaining everything. When I had clients that were showing up, let's say with money issues, I can almost lay money, pun intended, on the table that there was some kind of significant trauma that ultimately resulted in money issues, and it wasn't open centers. it wasn't the open centers that were causing it. There was some lived experience that happened, right? Or especially like I did weight loss for a very short time. I stopped doing weight loss because the amount of unbelievable, horrifying trauma in people with weight loss in the weight loss classes, I was like, I can't do this. It's breaking my heart. And I really started to look at, okay, what's going on here? The chart gives us a ton of information, but it's not helping me get down to the root of why is somebody stuck. And so I spent a lot of years researching child development, adult development, developmental psychology, human design, the archetypes in human design, the history of the different esoteric systems in the root of human design. And I started to correlate the different parts of the chart to core developmental themes or core developmental challenges that have to be mastered in a healthy way for somebody to be resilient, for somebody to be able to face challenge and be able to make good, long-term, sustainable decisions in the face of challenge. Because my own life is certainly showing me, life has challenges. And you have to be able to work your way through those challenges and use those as catalysts for growth and not catalysts for PTSD, right? And so at a certain point, I started to explore the idea that actually in the chart, there are 9 base archetypes. And those 9 base archetypes really have to be functioning at a moderate to high level for somebody to actually be able to decondition in a healthy way. And that was sort of the birth, if you will, of the 9 resiliency keys, which is a core concept that we teach in my quantum human design training. The second thing that happened sort of in this part 2 of my story, my professional story, is I also started to have a lot of clients who were saying to me, I don't like the words in human design. I don't like the language. It doesn't feel right.
And hearing that you have the line of terminal disease.
Right. Or, if you go to say, the incarnation, actually, this is actually what started it. Oh my gosh, this is a terrible story. I forgot this until I started saying this. So I taught a parenting class. I had a whole program, Parenting by Design, and I taught a parenting class, and I made the mistake, it was a big mistake, of bringing Ra's Incarnation Cross book to class, thinking, oh, the parents can look up their kids' incarnation crosses. And this mother came to me furious with me, and she said, this book says that my child would F asterisk, 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 a snake if given the opportunity. And I was like, what? And then I went and I looked at the book, and then sure enough, it says this incarnation cross would a snake if given the opportunity. And I was like, oh my God, nobody even edited this when they put it into a book. I mean, come on.
Maybe we shouldn't say. I'm not going to say, but everyone's going to be Googling their incarnation cross by Ra to see if it's theirs.
I don't even remember which one it was now in hindsight, but I was like, oh, this is a problem. I probably need to really get in here and rewrite some of this. Right. So already in the Understanding Human Design book, I had rewritten some of the language. And as I started to really listen to my clients, and I've always had the privilege of having what I would consider to be really evolved and really conscious clients. I started to realize, there's a problem with the language. It's not resonating with a lot of people. There's a problem with strategy. It's not resonating with a lot of people. And these people are not suffering, and they're not horribly conditioned, and their life is working really well, but they're not following strategy. What's going on? And that's when I really started to hear Ra talking. It was a conversation that we had in the office at one point where Ra had said, one day I'm going to write the Awakened Ravi Ching, because the voice told me that strategy and authority is about healing. It's about deconditioning. But once you're deconditioning, you're not done. That's just the baseline, right? He didn't say it that way, but that's just the baseline. And of course, he passed in 2011 and never got to write the Awakened Ravi Ching. And that phrase, the Awakened Ravi Ching, kept coming back to me over and over again. And that's when I just thought, well, Ra's gone, and I don't want to be dishonoring of his work because I owe him a tremendous amount of gratitude and respect. I mean, I have a deep love for Ra. And it just kept coming to me that I needed to write the Awakened Ray of I Ching, that my clients were wanting more, and that strategy was a healing prescription. That strategy brought us back to baseline, but that we didn't have to wait the way that we're taught to wait forever, that didn't even make any sense. And so I started exploring and experimenting with language and really looking at how do I evolve these archetypes. And I especially went really deep into the I Ching and really looked at, the I Ching talks a lot about the evolved human. And actually the Kabbalah does as well. Kabbalah is an entire system that's based on consciously choosing to move closer to a divine expression of the self. And so as I sat and looked at different languages, I decided that different vocabulary words, I decided that I needed to actually test these vocabulary words and make sure that the quality and the frequency of words, because language has energy, language has a frequency. I wanted to make sure that whatever new vocabulary words we came up with, that those, sorry, I was looking for my thesaurus. I don't actually, oh, I see it. I'll go get it in a second. But I'll show you. Hold on, don't go away. So this was the book that I used as a Rodale's. This is a synonym finder, but it's basically actually a synonym finder and a thesaurus. And I went through for like 2 years picking and choosing words, and then literally going into the lab and testing the words to see what's the frequency. When this word is spoken, what is the frequency of this word? And so that is really the story of the birth, if you will, of quantum human design, which is, it's not, I don't want to say it's my version of the Ray of I Ching, because that's Ra's term, but certainly it was an intention to craft a way of speaking to the potential of human design and really address the potential to help people explore, okay, I've reached baseline, I've deconditioned, I've looked at my trauma, I've looked at my openness, I've looked at my imprinting, I've looked at my ancestral lineage, I'm back in my body, which is really what to me strategy is about. It's about getting you back into your body so that you can remember, oh, this is what right feels like, and this is what wrong feels like. And I can trust my body's response to things because I'm not reacting anymore, because I'm not traumatized anymore. I'm now deconditioned. So I'm having a pure response, a pure physical response to what's right and wrong for me. And then what's next? How do I evolve the story that I'm in? And that the intention of that quantum human design was to create sort of a structural framework through which we could deliberately, intentionally evolve to the highest expression of the potential of our unique stories. I think that's it. I think that's where the story ends so far, maybe.
I feel like in so many ways, that's where my story began too, when I sat here and, and what, focused on what you've said, but at the same time felt into how much gratitude I have for all of this that you have done and experienced and brought forward in a way that now seems like, oh, she just threw these words out and she just made these. It's just, we don't see the backstory and the tenacity, I think was even the word that Tiffany's watching. And she said something about your tenacity. And yes, it's really inspiring. But, the whole idea of there are certain key phrases that you use often. And I found myself for a while, like just kind of parroting them in a way that became subconscious, or just, intuitive, like that we're a once in a lifetime cosmic event, that, are tell a more empowering narrative, that all of these things really made a huge impact. And you're not the only one teaching those things. And I don't want to belittle it by that. There's a lot of stuff out there that talks about the frequency of our words. And, that's a very simple, you even use it in your teachings, is the whole idea of, in the beginning, there was the word, like this is ancient stuff, right? But the way you bring it into the modern world is really empowering, but also digestible, makes it and for me, when I found you and quantum human design, I was maybe, I don't know when I first found you, and started just watching videos or whatever. But I know when I met you, and I met you in 2021 at the International Human Design Conference in Colorado, which we will both be at this September. So hopefully everybody's going to come see us there. And I remember, I was just talking about this yesterday. I did a little in-person event, and I was talking to a woman, and she said, "You're my first in-person human design person I've ever met." She saw my sign and came over and talked to me. And she's 31 years old, and she is raising children by design. And she's 7 years into her experiment. And I was like, wow, that's amazing at 31 that you're already that deep into it. That was really cool. But I was telling her my first experience meeting human design people in person was at that conference. Mm-hmm. And that was a life-changing experience. And that is also the first time I ever tapped. And we did a group tapping session. And all the stuff, like there was a part of me, the old part of me, that was really a little bit embarrassed by how much stuff came out of me during that, right? Like, oh, what do people think of me? Like, but that was gone so quickly because there was so much love. And, I know one of the things that you've got a little controversy about is you're building an army of love, right? Some people don't like the word army, but I don't want to get into that part, but I love the idea, right? Like we're quantum revolutionaries, as you say.
Right.
And that was such a different dynamic to be in that sort of setting. And it just but there were parts of me that were just still like afraid. And it took probably my whole training with my friend Nancy Fairchild, who I met through the quantum alignment training, and all of our tapping that took way longer than it probably should have, because we were working through stuff together in a way we needed to. So I shouldn't say that it should have. Yeah. But that whole experience, that so much of, I already had the knowledge in a lot of ways from traditional human design, but I was stuck in the narrative of, well, I'm a projector, and I don't have the energy, and I don't have the invitation, and I don't know. And I was stuck in the bitterness, which I now see was protecting me and keeping me from going into environments that weren't correct for me. Right. And so your way of reframing things and seeing things has been so pivotal. And so people will know if they follow me, like if you aren't just someone who randomly found this, if you actually listen to me and you listen to this podcast, or if you are part of my group and you see my postings, I'm constantly sharing, affiliate links to programs that you do and different master classes and stuff like that, because I fully attribute much of who I am to going through those processes. So I thank you for that. So, I just wanted to interject that little part in your story to acknowledge the impact that it has had on me at this point. And here's one of the things I'd like to just touch on a little bit, is because I know you just, last month or something, your second Saturn return, right? And
don't invoke it.
Okay, my second Saturn return brought me to my knees.
Yes.
But I am so grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
My Saturn gates are gate 13. So all about a narrative. And I really, really saw where I was disempowering myself through my narrative in ways that, I still will get little touches that come up where I realize, oh, why am I feeling this way? And it's and now instead of pushing away the icky feeling, I think, oh, why am I feeling icky? Wonder what this is bringing up for me. And what's the story I'm telling myself about what's happening that's causing me to feel this, right? Mm-hmm. And that's been really powerful. So I'm curious, because I do know that your Saturn gates are gate 63. And
they are.
And so I'm curious, no pun intended, with gate 63, what sort of things have come up in that venue of that energy of gate 63 for you?
Oh, so I have the gate 63 and the 64, defined in my chart multiple.
3 is my unconscious Chiron, by the way.
Oh, so you get that. So, for me, it's the conundrum in my chart. So I'm cross of contagion. My job is to spread information or infect people with information, if you want to use Ra's words. And it's sprinkled in with a hefty dose in my definition of self-doubt. That 63 is self-doubt, right? And I think it's funny. Like, so I have this message that I wrote to myself. Like, everybody wants to hear what you have to say, because I grew up in a family where it was a very gender biased family. I had a brother who was the golden one, and I was the daughter. And the constant thing, the message that I got is, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. Nobody wants to read your writing. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. And that was my conditioning story, right? And that's obviously the story that gets played out also through my gates. And I have very big goals for what I want to build in this world. I want to completely retrain, reframe how we heal. I want to integrate personal narrative and storytelling into modern day, everyday medicine. We should be looking at the whole person and not just the disease. And I want to build a world of equitable, just, sustainable, abundant peace. I have grandbabies. I have another grandbaby coming in December. I want those children, and my beautiful projector, all children across the board on the planet, to be able to play and create in a world that's safe, where they have food, where when they're born, we get a chart and we look at these people and say, okay, how can I, as a parent, grandparent, aunt, teacher, how can I be a steward for this incredible once in a lifetime cosmic event so that this person gets to be who they are? It's a big message. It's an idealistic message, and it's a message that's dependent on my voice, on my words, my platform. And it makes me have to stretch and go into spaces that are really uncomfortable. It makes me have to grow into spaces where I'm judged and people make fun of me because I'm idealistic, and also I'm way out of my comfort zone. And people think I'm only doing it for the money, which I have zero drive around money. But the money does afford me bigger rooms.
There's nothing wrong with money.
Totally. Right. It doesn't motivate me, is all I'm really saying.
Yeah.
9-6, I'm like, whatever, it'll show up if it shows up. But the self-doubt, oh my God, it's so hard. It's so hard. And that is really, I think, what's up for me. Again, my Chiron is in the 22, which is in quantum human design is surrender. So it's like I have this decade 50 to 60 between surrendering, letting go, and trusting the process, and not letting self-doubt cause me to back away. Right. So that's my big piece. My Jupiter is in the 12 in line 4, which is, and traditional human design is the prophet, right? And 16, which is zest in quantum human design. So if I can trust myself, I can bring a message with enthusiasm and hopefully be a good channel for the bigger picture, for the cosmic voice, if you will, so that I can, bringing the story around full circle, do what I came here to do, which is go forth and teach only love.
That's awesome. And so this is probably a good time for me to ask, what do you recommend for people who are new to you and want to connect and learn how to teach only love? I mean, obviously I have your affiliate links plastered all over my
good job
page. You can go there and find stuff. And even on my website, I have a thing at the bottom. You can go to affiliate links, and there's a couple of basic links in there for you. But the best way for people to find you.
I would say you go to our website, quantumhumandesign.com, go to Amazon, search Karen Curry Parker, and you can find all my books there. If you're brand new to quantum human design, we have an introduction to quantum human design book. And if you want to get your chart in quantum human design language, you can go to our free humandesignchart.com site, and you'll be able to run a chart with the language, and it'll come with a little report. But go back to Kathy's page if you're interested in learning more or becoming a student. Go back to Kathy's page and click on those links.
I will add that I also have, after you run, my chart does run in traditional language, but I do have an option at the bottom where you can run, you can purchase a advanced report that has all the quantum descriptions, not just your chart, but like the details of it all. And so that's something that's available for purchase at kathybashanko.com. So
yeah, go do that.
Okay. Awesome. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe not only of your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I'd love to help guide you through the process of fully embodying who you came here to be. I also invite you to check out my website at kathybashanko.com, where you can run your free human design chart and find all the ways to connect with me directly. And don't forget to follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms. And please take a moment and give me a 5-star review. It really does help. Thanks so much, Karen. This has been really, really great for me to listen to all of this. I'm sure other people have loved it too. And I thank you so much for taking time on your Sunday morning. So thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
It's been great. So peace out, everybody.